Hello and welcome back to the Art Channel, and this week we're going to be reviewing a show hosted by Pace Gallery in London. It's called A Strong Sweet Smell of Incense, and it refers to a police raid on a house occupied by Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull. And Richard Hamilton, the artist, made a painting that portrays Mick Jagger and the dealer, Robert Fraser, being driven away from court after their sentence for the possession of marijuana, to which the police referred to in that title. And this is an exhibition that commemorates the contribution of Robert Fraser, the dealer, whose gallery in the 1960s and subsequently in the 1980s was a very prominent hub for contemporary art, representing both British and American artists. And so we have a whole range of material here. It's very cluttered, but rather kind of exciting and dynamic, using archival material.
Yeah, and it's an exciting exhibition to walk into. You see things you know, you see things you recognise, and it really is a snapshot of swinging London, of counterculture. There's the Beatles, there's pop artists, as you say, from the UK and the USA, the sculpture, screen printing, painting, and it's quite joyous and flamboyant as an exhibition, so it reflects those times, I think.
It's like a commemoration of a particular countercultural moment when British culture was changing, when the art being made was taking modern art, contemporary art in a new direction. And the painting by Richard Hamilton is prominently positioned, hung as you enter the space. As I said, it's taken from a a photograph printed in the press. Mick Jagger and Robert Fraser are shielding their eyes to maintain their anonymity, their dignity from the flashbulbs of the paparazzi.
It is an iconic image, and it's quite fun to see Mick Jagger, this great figure of rebellion, in rather a smart suit. So he turns up at court and he does still kind of play the game to some extent. And
Richard Hamilton is using wordplay because the judge said he had to impose a swinging sentence. And so there's a pun here with swinging London. The term used to describe this kind of high point of London's cultural activity in the 1960s.
The second piece we want to talk about is a piece by Peter Blake, a British pop artist, very much associated with album covers, with pop stars, with singers, and he started his relationship here, introduced by Fraser, to the Beatles. And so it's again another iconic image. It's the four Beatles, it's headshots of them with their kind of pudding bowl haircuts, very early on in their career. And it is an exhibition which is absolutely full of just things that define that era, define that kind of confidence and rule breaking.
And it's the emergence of youth culture, of celebrities, the pin-up, and the pop star. And he paints this portrait of the Beatles like a poster. And so he's conflating that idea of high and low culture using the language of popular entertainment, really.
Blake, I think, is an interesting pop artist because British pop art tends to be, I think, sort of slightly quieter, slightly more thoughtful. So there's a real feeling of it's kind of like a rather a delicate illustration as well as being a kind of in-your-face painting.
And Blake brings that sort of sentiment, that ethos of nostalgia, of romanticism, really, about the kind of experiences of youth that really flows through into his art. I mean, you can see he's really someone who draws on English folk art too. Fairground signs, images from the circus, etc. And so the next work we're going to consider is a painting by Francis Bacon of a great friend of his, John Edwards. Reputedly they were lovers, and this is actually a rather sedate and calm image, isn't it? There's little sense of anxiety, although he uses this familiar device of setting the subject, the sitter, against this black doorway which is sometimes described as a kind of threshold between life and death. And underneath John Edwards is this seepage of kind of pink ectoplasm, almost like the spirit of the sitter draining away, sliding across the floor.
Although, as you say, it's quite a kind of demure Bacon. It's quite late, it's 1988. And Bacon, famous for his kind of agitated brushstrokes and sort of staining of the canvas, he doesn't make beautiful surfaces, beautiful paintings, but this one is quite conventional and more figurative than I think some of the earlier works. The sitter is not quite nude. I think he has his underwear on, so in a way it's quite a staid, respectful painting in a way.
Yes, there's a sense of intimacy, of affection, but Bacon still brings that sort of sharp, analytical eye and psychological penetration to his sitters.
Absolutely. I think however many Bacons you see, they always pull you up sharp. They're never a comfortable experience. No. Definitely. Moving on to a piece of sculpture, I think this is quite an interesting piece of work by Dine. It's a piece of sculpture about painting, which is, sometimes art jokes don't work, but this is quite amusing. It's a little vitrine and it has a little shelf at the bottom. It's called Flesh Canvas. So there is a canvas at the back of the vitrine, just painted flesh colour. You can barely notice it. A shelf at the bottom with little pots of paint in primary colours and 3 or 4 piles of paint which have been scraped off a canvas. This is the painter who's changed his mind, and they have a kind of skin over the top of them. They sit a bit like kind of pools of custard on this little shelf at the bottom.
It's like a reversal of the creative process, or a sort of changing of his mind, that a painting can follow a sort of deeper arc than just a completed image. So it has a kind of conceptual teasing embedded in it. And then beside that work is a series of pieces by Claes Oldenburg, the American artist, pop artist, and his sculptures always make me laugh. They're so whimsical and humorous. He blows up and magnifies ordinary domestic objects that you don't really consider unless they go wrong. He's making here a sculpture of a electrical plug that he suspends from the ceiling. He's also made a light board switch, so ordinary switches that he translates into a soft, rather inert, sagging material. And so there's that kind of journey from the functional to the dysfunctional, from the idea of practicality to the absurd.
And you forget how a simple device like changing a texture or a surface or scaling something up or down can throw something into a new light. You see ordinary objects in a different way, and we're so used to doing that now in our art schools, in our galleries. But in the 50s and 60s it was a radical move to look at ordinary consumerist life, these boring, mundane objects, and to make you relook and reimagine. And they're still quite fresh, even now. Absolutely,
he's inviting you to look at the world in greater detail, to pause, to think, and to consider imaginatively new possibilities for the material world. I really enjoyed this show, particularly the archival material. There's a long glass vitrine with a correspondence owned by Robert Fraser, illustrating his relationships with the artists that he represents and also writers he knew. You can see the summons from the magistrate's court for showing obscene paintings by Dine. You see a letter from Ed Ruscha pleading for a rather kind of modest $60, an artist who's really trying to pay the bills, locked in that rather kind of precarious relationship with the dealer.
It's an interesting show. It's a real snapshot of the 1960s, right from sort of high-end production of painting and sculpture to, as you say, people trying to get paid for the work they're doing, the kind of other end of the scale. And it's still fresh, and it's amusing and flamboyant, and it's a great art history lesson.
Yes. It's like a time capsule, really.
Absolutely.
And much of the material is lent by the artist Clarke, who was represented by Robert Fraser during the 1980s. And Clarke has a solo show in the upstairs gallery at Pace. And so you can see really Clarke developing from his early days through to contemporary work.
I think it's interesting to see an exhibition about a curator, curated by an artist, so we're kind of turning it on its tail. So I think thoroughly recommended.
So thank you for watching the Art Channel this week. Please do subscribe, feel free to embed any of our videos and share the films that we're making. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you.